Ever get that, knot in your stomach when you think something's gone wrong with your investments or maybe your bank account, and you're just not sure who to turn to?
Oh, yeah, it's a really frustrating feeling. Like you're lost in some kind of financial maze, right?
Exactly. Well, that's precisely what we're diving into today. We're looking really closely at grievance redressal mechanisms.
Uh-huh.
Basically, how you as an investor, as a consumer, how you're protected when things, well, don't go quite right in the financial world.
And we've pulled together quite a bit of material for this deep dive. We're looking at the Consumer Protection Act, regulations around investment advice,
Right.
banking practices, insurance guidelines, even the rules for the pension sector.
Hmm.
It's pretty comprehensive.
It really is. And our mission here is, well, it's pretty straightforward but crucial.
Uh,
We want to arm you with the knowledge. Where do you go? What steps do you take when you hit a snag?
yeah, turning that frustration into, informed action,
Well,
taking control.
exactly. So let's say you do face an issue, maybe with a financial product or service. Where do you even start? What's the first move?
Okay, so in almost every single situation, your very first step should be contacting the provider directly.
The company itself.
Yeah, the company that gave you the product or service, your bank, your investment advisor, your insurer, whoever it is. They should have their own way of handling complaints internally.
Right. Kind of give them the first crack at fixing it.
Exactly. Let them try to make it right first.
Okay, so say you spot a weird fee on your bank statement, or maybe your investment portfolio performance seems way off what was promised. That's when you make that first call. But what exactly counts as a grievance to them? What kind of things trigger this?
Well, a grievance, based on how our sources define it, it's really any kind of communication where you're expressing dissatisfaction,
Uh-huh.
you know, about the service you got or pointing out a potential problem with the product itself.
So it could be quite broad then.
It can be. Things like maybe you got inaccurate information that led you down the wrong path, or you got hit with unexpected fees, penalties that weren't really explained clearly up front,
Okay.
or even just significant delays in service, or maybe a complete lack of service you were supposed to get. All that counts.
Got it. So it's not just about, say, losing money on an investment, but also about how you were treated, the service quality. Okay, now, what if you do that? You contact them, go through their process, and you still feel like it's not resolved fairly. Is that it? Are you stuck?
No, absolutely not. That's a key point. If their internal process doesn't give you a satisfactory resolution, there's a really important next step.
Okay.
You have the right to escalate your concern. Take it to the regulatory body that oversees that specific part of the financial industry.
Ah, so there's an overseer.
Exactly. This regulatory oversight, it's like a vital safety net for consumers.
That makes a lot of sense. Kind of like having an umpire or a referee. Now, our sources also talk quite a bit about what makes a good grievance system. One that actually works for people. What are the key features?
Yeah, and what's interesting is the real focus on having a structured, transparent process, something that aims for timely solutions.
Right.
For a system to be really robust, really effective, it needs several key elements working together.
Okay, let's break those down then. What are these essential components we should look for?
All right. First off, the system needs to be clear about the source of a legitimate complaint. What kind of issues does it actually cover?
Okay.
For investors, for example, this often means the complaint has to relate back to specific laws and regulations, like the SEBI Act, Securities Contract Regulation Act, the Companies Act.
So it keeps it focused on relevant financial issues, not complaining about the coffee in their office.
Exactly. It ensures the system deals with stuff within its proper scope.
Makes sense. What's next?
Second, the date and time the complaint is received. This is really critical.
Why is that so important?
Well, often there are time limits for filing complaints. It's not really about blocking people, but more about making sure investigations can happen while details are still fresh, evidence is available.
Ah, okay. So it prevents trying to resolve something from like 10 years ago where nobody remembers anything?
Precisely. It helps avoid a backlog of really old, hard-to-resolve issues clogging things up. So the takeaway is, if you have a grievance, don't sit on it.
Got it. Act relatively promptly. What else makes a good system?
The nature of the complaint itself needs to be clearly defined or categorized. This helps in sorting issues, addressing them effectively.
Uh-huh.
And it also helps filter out complaints that might be, frivolous or just completely outside what the system is meant for. So being clear and specific about what went wrong really helps on your end too.
Clarity helps everyone.
Yeah.
Okay. What about how the complaint is actually handled, the process?
That brings us to the difference between internal and external resolution. A good system usually starts with the company itself, trying to fix the problem internally.
Yeah. Right, giving them that first shot.
Yeah. And only if that internal process doesn't work out for you should there be a clear path to escalate it externally to the regulator or another body.
Seems logical. And how do you, the person with the grievance, know what's going on? You don't want it disappearing into a black hole.
Absolutely not. That's where status updates and action taken reports, ATRs, come in. You should be able to track your complaint's progress.
Okay.
See what steps are being taken. That transparency is key for building confidence in the whole process.
Yeah, just knowing it's being looked at is reassuring. What about speed? Do these things drag on forever?
They shouldn't. The time taken for resolution is another crucial factor. There should ideally be set timeframes for resolving complaints.
Right.
Our sources mention things like aging reports, which basically track how long complaints have been open. That focus on getting things sorted out reasonably quickly is vital for trust.
So the aim is fair and efficient. Okay. And the last piece, what if you just fundamentally disagree with their initial decision?
Then there absolutely must be a clear, accessible escalation mechanism. If you're not happy with what the company offers initially, there has to be a defined way to take it higher, to someone independent.
Right.
That right to escalate is really fundamental consumer protection.
Knowing there's another step you can take provides a lot of peace of mind. Okay, let's get specific now. What if your issue is with an investment advisor? Maybe they gave you advice that turned out to be, well, really unsuitable. What's the process there?
Right. So SEBI, the Securities and Exchange Board of India, is very clear on this. They mandate that every registered investment advisor must have a proper grievance redressal system.
They have to have one.
Yes. It shows how important accountability is in financial advice.
And for us as investors, what does that look like practically? What should we see?
Well, advisors are required to clearly display the contact details for their compliance officer,
Okay.
and also the name, address, email, phone number of their CEO, or maybe the partner or proprietor if it's a smaller firm. This makes it very clear who you need to contact first if you have an issue.
So again, direct contact first. And if talking to them or their compliance person doesn't resolve it.
If you're still unsatisfied after that, maybe with their response or even if they don't respond properly, then you can escalate your grievance directly to SEBI
How do you do that?
through their online platform, which is called Scores.
Scores.
Okay, we'll definitely dig into Scores in more detail shortly because it's a really central tool for investor protection, especially in the capital markets.
Sounds important. Okay, let's zoom out again to the whole capital market. Say you have an issue with your stockbroker, maybe trades weren't done right, or there are errors in your account statement. What's the path then?
It follows that same basic principle we've been talking about. Step 1, lodge your complaint directly with the market participant involved.
So, with the broker in this case.
Exactly. Detail the issue clearly.
And if the broker doesn't sort it out to your satisfaction, next step, is it Scores again?
Yes, Scores is the primary escalation point if you're not happy with the broker's resolution. You go to the Scores portal, follow the guidelines.
Okay.
But there's actually another important avenue now in the capital market, the Online Dispute Resolution Portal, or ODR.
ODR, online dispute resolution, that sounds potentially faster, maybe more streamlined?
It can be, yeah. The ODR portal lets you start an online resolution process. You can do this after you've gone through Scores, or potentially even as an alternative at an earlier stage if both you and the broker agree.
Oh, interesting. So it's flexible.
It is. And interestingly, the market participants, like the broker, they can also initiate ODR, provided they give you proper notice, so it works both ways.
Okay. Any deadlines for using ODR?
Yes, that's important. Any dispute resolution you start through ODR has to be within the standard legal time limits, the statute of limitations.
Right. Those legal deadlines always apply. Okay, let's definitely circle back to Scores now. You said it's central. Can you give us the full picture? What exactly is Scores and what kind of complaints does it handle?
Right, Scores, which stands for SEBI Complaints Redress System. It's SEBI's dedicated online platform. It's designed specifically for investors. So you can lodge and track complaints against pretty much any entity or product that SEBI regulates. Think of it as a central digital hub for grievances in the securities market.
Okay. And what sorts of entities and products are we talking about here? What falls under SEBI?
It's actually a really wide range. We're talking companies issuing shares, IPOs, follow-on offers,
Right.
mutual funds, portfolio management schemes, PMS, venture capital funds,
Okay.
and then all the intermediaries too. Brokers, merchant bankers, depositories, registrars, and as we mentioned, investment advisors regulated by SEBI. If SEBI regulates them, Scores is generally the place for complaints.
That covers a lot of ground. That's good to know.
Hmm.
But are there things Scores doesn't handle? It's useful to know the limits.
Yes, definitely. There are important exclusions. Scores usually won't take up complaints that are, say, incomplete or really vague.
You mean specifics?
You do. Or complaints that are just allegations without any supporting documents or proof. Providing clear info and evidence is key. Also, it's not for general suggestions or asking for guidance or explanations about how markets work. It's for actual grievances.
Got it. Specific problems, not general questions. What else is typically out?
Things like complaining about a share not trading much, its illiquidity, or just being unhappy with the market price of a stock.
Right. Market risk isn't a grievance against the company, usually.
Exactly. Also, non-listing of shares from private offers or disputes that come purely from private agreements between two parties. Those usually fall outside Scores.
So it's focused on the regulated entities and their conduct, not broader market stuff or private deals. Are there limits based on the type of company, too?
Yes. SEBI generally doesn't handle complaints via Scores against companies that are unlisted or have been delisted,
Okay.
or companies that are being wound up, liquidated, declared sick. Also, crucially, if the matter is already in court or before another quasi-judicial body, if it's sub judice, Scores typically won't get involved.
Respecting the legal process.
Right. And finally, if the complaint clearly falls under another regulator's jurisdiction, they'll likely point you there.
Makes sense. So Scores is really targeted. Now, what happens after you file a complaint on the portal? What's the process?
Okay, once you submit it, SEBI first reviews it. They check if it's within their scope, if it's complete enough. If it passes that check, they forward it to the specific entity you complained about, the broker, the mutual fund, whoever.
Right.
That entity then has to investigate your complaint and submit an action-taken report and APR back to SEBI within a set time frame.
And can I see that ATR?
Yes, absolutely. As the investor, you can log back into Scores anytime to see the status of your complaint and view the ATR that the entity submitted. It keeps things transparent.
That's good. You're kept in the loop. What if I look at that ATR and think, nope, that doesn't solve my problem? What then?
Right. So Scores and the ODR portal we mentioned, they're designed as alternative dispute resolution methods. They aim to be faster, maybe less costly than going to court. But, and this is crucial, using them doesn't take away your fundamental right to seek legal action.
So court is still an option.
Always. You can always approach the relevant court. But remember that statute of limitations, the legal time limit, still applies. You can't wait forever to file a court case.
That's a really critical point about those deadlines. Okay, let's shift gears now. From investments to banking. Customer service feels so central to banking. How does grievance redressal work there?
You're absolutely right. Banking is fundamentally about service. So having effective, accessible ways to handle complaints is just vital for trust.
Yeah.
The main goal is, ideally, to minimize grievances happening in the first place. But when they do, they need to be dealt with promptly and fairly.
So like with investments, if I have a problem with my bank, maybe an unauthorized transaction, an issue with a loan application, first step is call the bank.
Exactly. Every bank has its own internal customer redressal department or specific officers for this. You can complain through phone, email, maybe in person at the branch.
Okay.
But there's also an independent body that plays a big role here. The Banking Codes and Standards Board of India, or BCSBI.
BCSBI, I haven't heard much about them. What's their role?
They're basically an independent watchdog set up by the Reserve Bank of India, RBI. Their main job is to make sure banks treat customers fairly and stick to minimum service standards.
How do they do that?
They've created something called the Code of Banks' Commitments to Customers. It outlines standards for fair treatment, transparency, things like that. Many banks voluntarily adopt this code.
So it's like a benchmark for good practice.
Okay.
And if going through the bank's internal system doesn't work, or I'm not happy, is that where the banking ombudsman comes in?
Precisely. The banking ombudsman is an independent official appointed by the RBI specifically to handle unresolved complaints against banks.
What kind of complaints can they handle? Is it pretty broad?
It is quite broad, yes. Covers issues with deposit accounts, payments, problems with interest charges or fees, penalties, disputes over ATM transactions, debit or credit cards, even things like unjustified refusal to grant loans in some cases. It covers a lot of the common pain points.
Okay. So how do I approach the ombudsman? Can I just go straight to them?
Generally, no. The rule is You must first complain directly to your bank and give them a reasonable chance to sort it out.
How long do I have to wait?
You can usually approach the ombudsman only if you haven't received a satisfactory response from the bank within 1 month of complaining, or if the bank outright rejected your complaint earlier.
Okay, so give the bank a month first. Makes sense. And how do I actually file a complaint with the ombudsman? Is it complicated?
No, the RBI has tried to make it accessible. You can file online through the RBI's Complaint Management System, CMS portal.
Okay.
You can email the ombudsman's office, or you can submit a physical written complaint. And importantly, banks have to display info about the ombudsman scheme, including contact details, right there in every branch.
Good, so the info should be easy to find. What happens once the ombudsman gets my complaint?
They'll first check if it's something they can handle. If yes, they'll usually try to facilitate a settlement first, through mediation or conciliation between you and the bank.
Try to get everyone to agree.
Exactly.
Yeah.
If that works within about a month, great, issue resolved. But if mediation fails, the ombudsman will then investigate independently. They'll look at evidence from both sides and then issue an award.
An award, what's that, like a judgment?
Yes, it's
Yeah.
essentially their formal decision on the matter.
Mm-hmm.
And if you, the complainant, accept the award, it becomes binding on the bank.
Okay. What if I go through the bank, then the ombudsman, and I'm still not happy? Any more steps within the banking system?
Well, within the bank itself, there's usually an internal escalation path.
Right.
Branch manager, then maybe zonal manager, then up to a head office level like a GM for customer service.
Right.
Plus, there's a central government portal called CP-DRAM's Centralized Public Grievance Redress and Monitoring
The
System.
MPGRM.
Yeah, you can file banking grievances there too, pgportal.gov.in. It gets forwarded to the bank, and the system tracks it. So multiple layers, really.
Good to know there are fallback options. Okay, let's switch again. Insurance. This can be a tricky area, especially with claims. What's the setup there?
Very similar starting point. First step, always, approach the insurance company's own internal grievance redressal mechanism. They all have to have one.
And what counts as a grievance in insurance? Is it just about claims being rejected?
No, it's broader than that. IRDAI, the insurance regulator, defines it as any communication expressing dissatisfaction
Okay.
about service standards, any deficiency in service from the insurer or their intermediary, like an agent. And it includes asking for some kind of remedial action. So yeah, covers service issues too, not just claims.
Got it. So if the insurer's internal process doesn't work out or they ignore me,
That's when you can go to the insurance ombudsman.
another ombudsman.
Yes, appointed by the government under specific rules for insurance grievances.
And when can I approach this ombudsman? Same rules as banking.
Broadly similar conditions. You can go if the insurer hasn't resolved your complaint within the regulator's time frame, usually a month, or hasn't responded at all, or if you're just unhappy with the resolution they offered.
Okay. What kind of issues does the insurance ombudsman typically handle? What are the grounds?
The rules list specific grounds, things like partial or total rejection of claims, disputes about the premium amount, disagreements over how the policy wording applies to a claim.
Right, policy interpretation can be tricky.
Exactly. Also, delays in settling claims, or even if they took your premium but never actually issued the policy documents. These are core issues.
They definitely sound like major problems. How does the insurance ombudsman try to resolve these? Is it mediation again?
Yes, mediation is the first step. They try to get you and the insurer to agree on a fair settlement. If you both agree in writing, the ombudsman makes a recommendation within a month.
And if I accept that recommendation?
Then it's binding on the insurer. But if mediation fails, the ombudsman investigates further and issues a formal speaking award within 3 months. You then have a month to accept that award.
So mediation first, then a formal decision. Okay. What if I'm still not happy? Maybe I didn't like the insurer's response. Maybe I don't want to go to the ombudsman. Or maybe I did and I don't like their award. What then?
You still have options. If you're unhappy with the insurer's internal resolution, you can escalate to IRDI itself through their Integrated Grievance Management System, IGMS, on their website.
IGMS. Okay.
You can file online and track it there. And as we said, if that doesn't work, or in parallel, you can approach the insurance ombudsman.
Right.
And finally, even after the ombudsman's decision, if you're still not satisfied, you always have recourse to the regular courts or through the Consumer Protection Act.
So multiple layers again, ultimately leading to the legal system if necessary. Okay, final sector. Pensions. These are long-term products. How do grievances work here?
It depends on who offers the pension scheme. If it's a mutual fund pension scheme, it's regulated by SEBI, so you'd use the SCORE system.
Okay.
If it's an insurance company pension plan, it's regulated by IRDI, so you'd use their IGMS system or the insurance ombudsman route.
Got it. What about the big one, the National Pension System, NPS?
Right. For MPS, the Central Record Keeping Agency, the CRA, currently NSDL eGov is your first point of contact.
The CRA. Okay.
A grievance in NPS is similar dissatisfaction with conduct, service deficiency by intermediaries, seeking remedy, but it excludes incomplete complaints, suggestions, things outside PFRDA's scope, or matters already in court.
So I have an NPS issue. I contact the CRA first. How?
Yes, you can use their website, call center, or write to them. They have a specific grievance redressal officer, GRO, based in Mumbai.
And if the CRA doesn't resolve it within, say, 30 days, or I'm unhappy?
Then you can escalate to the NPS Trust. They oversee the system. They'll follow up with the intermediary and should respond within another 30 days.
Okay, CRA, then NPS Trust. Is there one more step?
Yes. The final step within the NPS framework is the ombudsman appointed by PFRDA, the pension regulator. If the NPS Trust doesn't resolve it in 30 days or you're still dissatisfied, you can appeal to this ombudsman.
So a clear three-step escalation. CRA, NPS Trust, PFRDA, Ombudsman. Okay. Now, we've mentioned all these regulators, SEBI, IRDAI, PFRDA. What if you disagree with an order from the regulator itself? Is there a higher appeal body?
Yes, there is. That's the Securities Appellate Tribunal, or SAT.
SAT, yeah.
It's set up under the SEBI Act, specifically to hear appeals against orders passed by SEBI, its adjudicating officers, IRDA, and PFRDA. It's a specialized tribunal for these financial regulators.
So kind of like a dedicated appeals court for financial regulation. How does it work? Is it like a normal court?
It has powers similar to a civil court, summoning witnesses, demanding documents, taking evidence, but it's guided by principles of natural justice, not strictly by the Civil Procedure Code. It can set its own procedures.
And its decisions are legally binding.
Yes. Proceedings before SAT are considered judicial proceedings. If you're aggrieved by an order from SEBI, EODI, or PFRDA, you can appeal to the SAT.
Is there a time limit?
Yes, you generally have 35 days from receiving the order to file your appeal with SAT. There's a process and a fee involved.
And is SAT the absolute final word?
Not necessarily.
Okay.
If you're still unhappy with the SAT's decision, you can appeal further to the Supreme Court of India.
Okay.
But again, there's a time limit, usually 60 days from the SAT's decision.
So a full appellate structure, even for regulatory decisions. Lastly, our sources mentioned a couple of other specific forums for things like NBFCs or unlisted companies.
Right. Just quickly, if you have issues with a non-banking financial company, NBFC, not repaying deposits or interest, you might approach the National Company Law Tribunal, NCLT, or a consumer forum.
NCLT. Right.
And for problems with deposits, bonds, or debentures from unlisted companies, you can file a complaint with the Ministry of Corporate Affairs via their website. These cover some specific gaps.
That's useful info for those niche situations. Okay, so wrapping this all up, the big picture seems clear. As a consumer, as an investor, you actually have quite a few different places to go for help across all these financial sectors.
That really is the key takeaway. Whether it's investments, banking, insurance, or pensions, there are systems, processes, and regulators designed to protect you and help resolve problems.
And the most important thing for all of us is just knowing these rights exist, knowing the right channels, the right steps to take to raise concerns effectively.
Absolutely. Being informed before something goes wrong is probably the best preparation. Knowing these mechanisms exist is the first vital step to taking action if you need to.
So maybe a final thought for everyone listening. Given how complex finance can sometimes feel and the different paths we've discussed, how can you best stay informed about these redressal options before you actually need them? Maybe it's about quickly checking the grievance process when you sign up for something new, or keeping a note of these key resources. Definitely something worth considering how to be prepared proactively.